All right, folks, so welcome to the latest update video I have on the developing income store story. In the last few days, I've received a few messages letting me know that some lawsuits had been filed by the receiver, basically finally to start moving the process forward of trying to sort of claw back some money for the investors who have been harmed in this whole thing. Now, this comes at a great time because investors are being asked to right now make decisions about how they want to move forward with their claims against the income store. If you clicked on this video and you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, look down into the description of this video and you will see the playlist that will give you all of the background. So the video I'm making right now is not the video that I had planned. I had planned to simply just go through and let people know who the defendants were and that these cases existed, and then as I had time, actually go get the complaints and take a look at them and make more videos as it made sense. Information that people needed. I thought that was interesting. But as I was going through the defendants, the named defendants that are being sued by, the income store with the receiver, I came across the defendant is Empire Flippers. Now, honestly, this didn't surprise me. Not because I suspect Empire Flippers of doing anything wrong, but I do suspect that there were probably transactions between the income store and other brokerages like Empire Flippers or FE International. I mean, it makes sense because the income store was acquiring sites. So out of curiosity, I decided to go get the complaint and take a look at it. And one of the allegations in that complaint, I basically found shocking. It basically changed the whole video I was going to make because I honestly could not believe that that statement was in the complaint. Like I said before, I expected the complaint, the initial pleading document to be about trying to claw back money. Now you have to know just straight away before I go any farther that pleadings in general, they are not evidence, but they can be construed as the frame for what sort of evidence the plaintiff or the defendant is planning on offering at a later date. In the complaint, it states that defendant Empire Flippers is a LLC formed in 2015. It talks about Empire Flippers offering a clients and marketplace for buying and selling websites and online businesses. There's nothing new about that. In paragraph 8, it says Empire Flippers acted as a broker in TGC's purchase of websites or online businesses through purchase agreements, which called for a commission due to Empire Flippers of 15% of the purchase price. But here is the kicker. Here is where the receiver just really went. Says the websites purportedly sold to TGC were either worthless or had a value far lower than the amount TGC had paid for them. And then paragraph 9 then goes on to say Empire Flippers received substantial amounts of funds from TGC in commissions in connection with the sale of websites or online businesses that did not provide value to TGC. Can you imagine what the guys over at Empire Flippers are doing while they are reading this complaint? They read those statements about their business? Oh my gosh. Now, the complaint the receiver has filed seeks the return of $2 million. The receiver states that close to $2 million was transferred to Empire Flippers by TGC and that Empire Flippers should basically return it, write the receiver a check for $2 million. And here are my problems with that. One, Empire Flippers is a broker. The websites that were transferred, ultimately purchased in these transactions, were not owned by Empire Flippers. They were only valued and sold by them. So to file a lawsuit against Empire Flippers alone and not each of the site owners who did business that ultimately resulted in that transfer, I mean, it's very selective. An example of folks just going after the deep pocket. Next, you know that if you have done business with Empire Flippers, or if you haven't, that Empire Flippers usually acts as the escrow. So they hold the funds. So the buyer, when they are going to buy something, they will give Empire Flippers those funds, and then Empire Flippers will hold them until the transaction is completed, take their cut, and release the remainder of the funds to the seller. So what I don't like about the complaint is it just talks about $2 million of transactions, I'm assuming those are the sale prices of the sites versus the commission that Empire Flippers would end up receiving. But the language makes it seem as though Empire Flippers was enriched to the tune of $2 million, that they just took $2 million from the income store and stuck it in their own pockets, which, unless I'm missing something, unless that $2 million is actually the 15% commission, and if that's the case, Good on you guys. Like, that's some great business that you're doing. But if TGC actually paid out only $2 million to Empire Flippers for the sites, inclusive of that broker fee, then that 15% of the $2 million is only $300,000. If the receiver is actually going to come out and try to prove that Empire Flippers participated in what was essentially fraud, they're going to have a gargantuan task. They will have to go back potentially as many as 5, 6, or plus years by the time this case gets to trial to try to recreate the circumstances of the site at the time of the transaction, not what the site looks like right now. So maybe they're looking at the site right now and maybe it looks like garbage, and whose fault is that? We're not going to look at the site, what it's doing right now. We're going to have to be looking at it at the time of the transaction. And that evidence, for one, may not exist anymore. It may be gone. Two, may or may not be able to be recreated. And then at that point, would it be sufficient to actually bear the weight of testimony, to actually prove anything? Where are you going to find an expert who's going to be able to testify to the value of a site back to 2015? I really think there are only potentially a few people in our industry who can do that, and not many people who necessarily would want to. Now, I'm going to speculate a little bit about what is going on here. Some of these transactions are very old, and the complaint notes that the receiver is under the gun about getting cases filed before the statute of limitations expires. And I also think that the date of filing is fairly indicative that these cases were all filed on December 30th. Sometimes what happens with lawyers is that when the statute of limitations is coming, you just file. The attitude is better to file and be wrong about your allegations because you can always dismiss the lawsuit later. But if you don't file, then the case is potentially lost and you've malpracticed the case. So it could be, and I'm not going to say that it is because I don't know, but it could be this is a case of the receiver trying to preserve her client's claims, and potentially what will happen is that some of these suits will just get dismissed. But I honestly have to wonder whether the parties, whether the attorneys or the individuals who participated in the preparation of these pleadings actually understand how Empire Flippers works and does its business, and just understands the whole website investing, buying and selling stuff at all. This also makes me think a lot about when I was a lawyer and when I filed, I don't want to say cases like this, but when I did work on tort type cases, and one of the strategies was often to file a lawsuit against a party when the aimed goal, like the ultimate thing, like the best resolution would be an out-of-court settlement, getting some maybe quick cash, maybe not always quick, but getting some cash in without having to necessarily go through the whole rigmarole and spending all the money required to take the lawsuit all the way through to a jury trial. That can be a really quick and easy win for a client. But the thing about this is that depending upon the types of claims and the allegations in the complaint, you may actually prevent the case from being negotiated. So I'm only speculating, but it's my guess that the receiver and her team has been in contact with Empire Flippers, trying to get them to just fork over the money without them having to do a whole heck of a lot, because that's something that lawyers often do. It's about giving people an opportunity to try to resolve the claim early without everybody, having to throw a ton of money down the rabbit hole after this stuff. But for Empire Flippers, their business is basically based on trust. Like, you come to Empire Flippers, you go to that platform because you trust that they have vetted the sites and that you're getting something valuable. So when somebody comes to the table with allegations that they're not providing what's basically a core tenet of their business and their service, I just don't see a middle ground for them. Maybe if the allegations hadn't been, fraud, maybe there would have been room to talk about trying to get some money to the investors. But when you start slinging stuff like unjust enrichment and fraud and worthless, you basically light a fire under a business to throw money at this to defend it at all costs. And in my opinion, that is probably a bad move for the investors. If the end goal is actually to put money in the pockets of the investors, I think Empire Flippers at that point with allegations like that would much rather spend $1 million on their lawyers than give $1 million to anyone who's going to throw mud at them. And for what it's worth, I don't believe the allegations. I've done business with Empire Flippers. I know a lot of people who have done business with them. And while people may not agree with maybe certain things that they do in their business or their specifics of their valuation, 42x versus 30x, I can't think of a single person who would say that the sites that are listed on Empire Flippers now or ever in the past, and I'm going to put my air quotes, worthless. We've been talking about this for months, about the possibility of other people and other companies being swept up into this. And what we are seeing is the first wave of it. So who else has been swept up into this? I'm just going to read out the list of the defendants, and then I have a feeling based upon this list, there are going to be more videos coming in the future. I see JDS Consulting. I don't know who they are, with Daniel Giordano and Asher Milgram. That's not familiar to me. I see William Longcore. I don't know who that is. And again, it's no surprise. I'm not a principal. I'm not involved in this. I'm just sort of a spectator reporting on it. I see Click Intelligence Ltd, which from my research looks like an agency. I see Ronald A. Fossum Jr. and that person, I just did a quick internet search and I am probably going to be looking deeper into that gentleman because I sense a story. I see William Courtwright and Courtwright Consulting. I see Don Shire Ministries, Joliet Catholic Academy and a Church and Others. I see Heartland Bank and Trust Company. I see Conklin Web Properties, and I see Mike Ingstrom. Do I think this is the end of this? And I do not. But what's happening just goes a long way to basically prove, to support what we've been saying all along, which is nobody is winning from this. There's only people who are losing, with the exception, I think, of the lawyers. I think the lawyers are probably the only ones who are like, yes, work! And that is what I have for today. If you're interested in learning more about this situation, on the screen you will see the playlist of all of my income store videos and another video from my library that YouTube thinks that you will enjoy. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.